Absolutely.
A rip out to right center here. Center fielder dives.
Oh. And Andreessen doesn't know. Andreessen doesn't know.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Center.
Chopped over to second. Ricciardi fields on to first. And there it is. The Worcester Bravehearts have won their 4th FCBL championship in 6 years as they mob behind the mound. Final score, Worcester Bravehearts win 12-2.
And yes, Virginia, there is baseball this summer, and there is baseball this summer right here in New England. The videos you just saw, participated in, and voted for, if you're a baseball fan like I am, if you live and breathe baseball, that was courtesy of your Worcester Bravehearts. Yes, I said the Worcester Bravehearts, the championship team, really the banner team of a league called the Futures Collegiate Baseball League. It's a league that we've had on the show before. Former, if you will, former Commissioner Chris Hall has joined us a couple of times over the years as we've talked baseball in Rhode Island and we've talked alternatives. But here to celebrate baseball in New England, yes, in the summer of 2020, yes, in the midst of a national health crisis in COVID, there is, if you will, the green grass of baseball to celebrate. Joining us live on the line for the very first time is Dave Peterson. He is the general manager of the Worcester Bravehearts of the Futures Collegiate Baseball League. Dave, welcome to the Coalition. Thanks for joining us on a hectic Friday night.
Hey, this is great. Thanks for talking baseball with me.
Listen, at this point in time in this nation, at this moment, we all need a little baseball. We might not even be fans, but we need a little bit of baseball. Now, I just want to set the stage. Again, the Futures Collegiate Baseball League. If you're a resident of Rhode Island, you're probably familiar with something called the Cape League. And we'll get really into the details, but think of this as sort of a mainland, a central New England with touches in southern New England, Cape League style baseball, collegiate baseball with other minor leaguers thrown in. You can find, by the way, the Worcester Bravehearts at worcesterbravehearts.com, and you can read more about the Futures League at, well, thefuturesleague.com. So it's just an outstanding moment. There's been so much negativity in this country. There's a lot of fear. There's a little bit of chaos, but we have a little bit of a touch of normality. So, Dave, I want to take this time that we've got this afternoon to really just give folks maybe a little bit of an infomercial about the Futures League and about the Worcester Bravehearts. But I got to ask first, right now, as we're all sequestered in our homes and doing the drudgery of our day-to-day jobs, just how did you get into baseball?
That's interesting because my start was in radio. And so I got bored with radio and I said, all right, enough of this. Let's get into baseball. But yeah, my start was in radio, not on the air per se, but in promotions. Mm-hmm. So, the promotions people that go out and they do all the grand openings. They're the ones that hand out the concert tickets. They're the ones that register the listeners to win a car. And that was my job for 5 years at WXLO in Worcester. And when the Worcester Tornadoes, the independent professional team, came to the city in 2005, I was hired as their on-field entertainment because of my background in radio. And that means just what you think it is. In minor league baseball, a lot of the entertainment is what happens between the innings. And so they hired me to be the person that throws the T-shirts into the stands and hands out the concert tickets and MCs the pie eating contest. And that was my first foray in baseball in 2005. I worked my way up into a sales role, selling sponsorships with that team. When that team left town in 2012, baseball didn't exist in the city of Worcester for about a year. And then the summer collegiate model came in as the Worcester Bravehearts, and I was hired as the general manager. So I've been here for 6 years, close to 7 now.
Mm-hmm. Now, so you are the guy, you actually have the T-shirt gun. Is that true? Locked in your office, probably in an undisclosed location? But do you use a T-shirt gun?
They won't hand me the T-shirt gun. They give me a slingshot like Dennis the Menace, and that's what I have to use because there's a lot of air pressure in that T-shirt gun.
There you go. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the league. This is a very successful but relatively young league. You started out in 2011, and what was the genesis of it? Because you've got a very interesting ownership mix at the league level. You've got folks who've experienced in minor league baseball, leagues like the Can-Am League, and folks who operated at the low minors, if you will. You've got marketing folks like yourself. How did this happen? How did it all come together?
In 2011, there were 4 teams that joined this league, and Worcester was not one of them. But at that point, as you mentioned earlier, there were 2 summer collegiate leagues here in New England that existed, and they still exist. One is the Cape Cod League, which is the #1 league in the country, highly regarded by many because of the talent that they bring in. And the second league that maybe people in Rhode Island are more familiar with is the New England Collegiate Baseball League, the NECBL, and that has 2 teams in Rhode Island currently, in Newport as well as the Ocean State Waves. Of course, that league is not currently, neither one of those 2 leagues is operating this summer. The Futures League was born out of the idea that there were New England baseball players who were not getting noticed by scouts, and they weren't getting spots on these leagues in the NECBL or in the Cape Cod League. And so when you're looking at programs around New England, such as URI, and you're looking at the University of Maine, Northeastern, Boston College, University of Connecticut, and then you even start looking at the Division II programs that are well known in New England for being powerhouses, like Southern New Hampshire and Franklin Pierce. And you're looking at a talent group from these colleges of baseball players who grew up locally, but they weren't getting the eyes on them, let's say. The scouts weren't seeing them. And so the Futures Collegiate Baseball League was developed to put an emphasis on these New England baseball players so that there's a rule within our league that at least 12 players on each roster need to be players who grew up here in New England or they currently attend a college in New England. And that was really the genesis for the Futures League. And you're seeing this year particularly that these numbers of New England baseball players are even higher. We've probably got about 20 on our team that grew up here in New England. So that is the story of the Futures League, combining great New England talent with the wonderful minor league aspect of baseball that people have come to fall in love with.
And there's been a lot of success. You've had players drafted. In fact, there was just in the most recent baseball draft, you've had some success getting players from your league, from New England colleges, into the pros. Tell us about some of your successes.
Well, since 2014, which was our first year, we've had 16 players that have been drafted into the pros. And I think that if you're going to look at the success story, then the #1 player you look at from our organization is a baseball player by the name of Aaron Civali. And he went to Northeastern University, and he is now a pitcher for the Cleveland Indians. He just made his major league debut last year. And when he made it to the big leagues, that was the 3rd big leaguer that has basically been developed out of the Futures Collegiate Baseball League since the league was founded in 2011. So you're right when you say that the league is still young. This is our 10th season. So when you stack us up against the New England Collegiate Baseball League and the Cape Cod League, they've been around much longer. But you're starting to see scouts finally take notice of these New England players. You're starting to see them take notice of kids like Cody Lawyerson, who grew up in Bingham, Maine, in the middle of the woods, and throws the ball 94 miles an hour, and was drafted by the Minnesota Twins last year and has advanced to the high A level for that franchise. And here's a kid that might not have gotten the exposure that is needed in order to get drafted if he weren't playing in the Futures League. And
that's an important part. You mentioned a 94 having a high heater like that. What what type of skill sets can folks become to appreciate, if you will, from New England collegiate baseball? I mean, we're all familiar with the Florida leagues, programs like Arizona, out in California. We don't traditionally associate, even though Little League has got its earliest beginnings here in the Northeast, we don't traditionally associate baseball development with New England. How wrong is that, by the way?
Well, I think it's a mindset because in New England, you can't play baseball outside for 4, maybe 5 months out of the year. Well, let's say 4 months out of the year. Whereas, when you're talking about Arizona and Florida, you've got baseball outside the entire year. So I think you've got this mentality of New England baseball players who are the guys that are wearing 3 layers underneath their jersey in early March. And they're shoveling snow out of the base paths so that they can play a game on a field. And you're seeing a lot more of these games happening now with turf fields being the new commodity, where they could plow the snow and literally have a baseball game 10 minutes later on a turf field. And that's how baseball players are bred in New England. They are the guys that are out there in 30-degree weather, and they are grinding because they know that if they're not out there, they're going to fall behind the guys that are down in Florida who've been working out all 12 months of the year.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. As far as the season goes, and as far as, we'll just say, a normal season pre-COVID, talk to us a little bit about each of the franchises that make up the league currently. True confession, I have been a fan of the Pittsfield operation for a number of years. A little bit of a tinge in my heart today, because I'd be preparing either for today or tomorrow to go to Pittsfield, to go to Wacona Field, which I believe is America's oldest continually operating baseball field. And also one of only 2 fields in America where you have to take a sun break because the field points in the wrong direction. So right around 6 or 7 o'clock, you're looking at a sun break because the sun is literally in the pitcher's eyes. But that's not happening this year because of all of these challenges. So the big question is, how is the Futures League being able to, accomplish that which others have not, despite best efforts and despite being great operations, and B, what teams are playing and which teams are still sidelined?
Well, to your first question about basically the geography of the Futures League, there are currently 6 franchises that are operating, and the Pittsfield franchise, even though they're not operating this year due to health-related concerns, they are still part of the Futures League. You're looking at markets that used to have independent baseball, markets where independent baseball failed. It wasn't a great economic model. And so you've got really nice stadiums in Nashville, New Hampshire, and Brockton, Massachusetts, and the old Wacona Park that you're talking about in Pittsfield. And this year, the newest entry is the New Britain Bees, a stadium that used to host AA baseball that then moved up to Hartford. And then an independent team came in, and that wasn't really economically feasible. So they've moved to this summer collegiate model. So how was the Futures League able to actually host a season when other leagues weren't? We go back to the core of what the Futures League is, which is developing and recruiting local talent. So I think that the number one point that we have to look at is the fact that our rosters are majority of them made up of players who are from New England, who for us live in Massachusetts and have been living under the same set of quarantine rules that you and I have been living under for the last 3 months. So number one, there's not this mystery of where these players have been. We know exactly where they've been. We know how they've been living in the last 3 months. And we don't have to worry about bringing in a whole bunch of players from out of state and trying to house them with host families, with strangers. So I think that's the primary point as to why the Futures League is now operating, whereas a league like the Cape Cod League that has to bring in players from Texas and California and Florida and then house them with host families, that model just didn't seem feasible in a year where we have a pandemic.
Right.
I think the second point here is that all of the owners in the Futures League have been on weekly calls since basically the beginning of April, trying to figure out how to make baseball happen. We've been in touch with all the local boards of health, Department of Public Health, the local government, to make sure that we are following all the local regulations. And right now, we've got franchises in this league in the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And if you take a look at the rules, the health codes in those 3 states, there are a lot of differences. And so we had to make arrangements for that. Right now, if we wanted to host a competitive baseball game in the state of Massachusetts, we couldn't do it because that does not happen until phase 3 of the reopening plan, which would be on Monday. However, the states of New Hampshire and Connecticut right now can host competitive baseball. So that is where the league started last night.
Excellent. And where was your first game last night?
We were down in New Britain, Connecticut at New Britain Stadium, the New Britain Bees. It's a 6,000-seat stadium.
Wow.
That I mentioned used to host AA, the New Britain Rock Cats. They were the Red Sox AA. Before that affiliation went to Portland, Maine. Then it hosted AA for Minnesota Twins for a while. And then, of course, they moved up to Hartford to become the Yard Goats. So the independent team went in, the New Britain Bees, and they were replaced this year by a summer collegiate model, which is much more economically feasible if you ask someone like me.
Yeah, and there is a business side to baseball. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because as a fan, it's even apparent now that to a large degree, baseball teams are starting to pivot away from independent minor leagues. It just, it strikes me that they're going to attempt to follow what the NBA and other leagues have done, which is to create their own development league. And that's a whole nother conversation. Part of it's economic, part of it's control, part of it's legal, part of it's flexibility. But, in New England, baseball fans were shocked to see the Lowell Spinners, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the circumstances, but my understanding was that while the Lowell Spinners can continue to play baseball, they are no longer affiliated with the Boston Red Sox. Any generic thoughts on that? Just the future of quote-unquote affiliated minor leagues?
Well, Major League Baseball and the owners are pushing for this idea that getting rid of 40 Class A minor league teams across the country would be a better economic model for minor league baseball. And losing those affiliation agreements means that they can decrease the size of the Major League Baseball draft. Right now, the draft is 40 rounds long. You've got organizations that have 6, maybe 7 minor league teams. And of course, in Major League Baseball, the affiliation agreement means that these major league teams are usually picking up the majority of the salaries of these players and the health insurance. And so this is a move by Major League Baseball where they're looking at potentially trimming the number of minor league baseball teams, primarily Class A teams, and you mentioned the Lowell Spinners, so that they can shrink down the draft and perhaps take a lot of that developmental aspect of the business in-house and put those leagues and teams underneath their umbrella. Mm-hmm. So it's not just Lowell, it's Burlington, Vermont that has a Class A team, the Vermont Lake Monsters. It's Norwich, Connecticut, the Connecticut Sea Unicorns that are down there. And so you got 3 teams just in New England that could be shuttered by Major League Baseball and their affiliation agreements. That doesn't mean that they can't have a team there. It just means that it won't be a feeder program for their Major League affiliate.
And to me, that's the beauty and the purity of summer league baseball. That's collegiate based. Again, without going down this road, as you're aware, there's been controversy in this state regarding public-private property and those type of relationships that are necessary, if you will, to maintain, as you point out, the business model. The beauty of your setup, there's almost a bygone innocence to it, because you're seeing great baseball. I can't stress that enough. I'm a small ball fan. I'm a fan of that approach to baseball. Sacrifice flies, bunting, hit and runs. that to me is what I find intriguing. And that's a thoughtful version of the sport. Those skills are available and on display at Bravehearts and Pittsfield when they're back in business. They're on display in those teams. I mean, you've got a real emphasis on not just putting out a product every night, but you're working with these young men every day on their skills, aren't you?
Well, and they're student athletes too. So let's not lose the student aspect of this, because the majority of the players who are playing in this league will not go on to play professional baseball. So this is an opportunity for these players to hustle. It's an opportunity to show that when they do hustle and get noticed by scouts, that they might end up making it to the next level. These are not paid athletes. Let's remember, this is an amateur baseball league. So when you start comparing it to the independent professional model, we're talking about amateur baseball players who are not collecting a salary. We're talking about players who are looking to develop over the course of the summer and are often given a development plan by their college coach. So a player that might be a freshman at the University of Rhode Island who does not get a chance to play because the team is stacked with upperclassmen will go and play in a summer league like the Futures League, develop those skills over the course of the summer, come back to campus in the fall with an opportunity to compete for a starting role as a sophomore because he has worked on that skill set over the course of 3 months in the Futures League.
No, that's spectacular. Folks, if you're just joining us, we have the privilege of hosting Dave Peterson. He is the general manager of the Worcester Bravehearts. They are not just a member, but they are the reigning champions of the Future Collegiate Baseball League, a league that is, as we've been talking, is a developmental league. It's collegiate-based. A significant part of each team's roster is what you would call local in terms of the colleges as well as where their home communities are. And it's a wonderful brand of baseball that's practiced all over central New England, and great skills, great discipline. I mean, again, really a lot of the best of young baseball. And incredibly enough, they've managed to put together, I guess it's 6 teams, to overcome, if you will, all the restrictions, all the challenges of the COVID, of the Corona era, and put a product out on the field. Not the homeowner, we'll talk about that in a second, but their on-the-road opener was last night in New Britain, of another minor league team stadium that's been repurposed, if you will, for collegiate baseball. And I believe firmly that this is the future of baseball in New England, in addition to the handful of, I'll call it major, minor, and of course, the Boston Red Sox. Folks, you are listening to the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born-free, civilly disobedient media. We broadcast live on the Worldwide Coalition Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, and of course, we simulcast on Twitter at Coalition_radio, and our mothership, coalitionradio.us. Dave, I know, again, this is a banner weekend, in part because you guys are playing baseball, so thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the Worcester franchise. So let's talk local baseball, because right now you guys are our local baseball team. You are going to be having your home opener, I guess, on July 11th. That location is not public yet. The ink is about to be dry and all that, but give us a little background of how you guys were able to put baseball together in central Massachusetts.
Isn't that strange that we have a home opener in a week and we haven't announced where it is yet?
Well, when you do, let us know, because we'll be all over it.
So for us, working through the precautions, the safety precautions, the limitations, if you will, that have been presented to us because of all of the coronavirus shutdowns, I guess we'd call it. We play on a college campus, typically, the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester at Fitton Field. It's a 3,000-seat stadium, and we've played there since day one in 2014. We draw about 2,500 fans a night to a 3,000-seat stadium. With social distancing, you can imagine that is a nightmare. And so that college campus has canceled all events through the month of July, including weddings, conferences, and they are trying to figure out how to bring back Patriot League activities and athletics in the fall. So that means that the Bravehearts cannot play on that campus. So we've been looking for another baseball field basically since late April, when we knew that this was a possibility. And we've been looking for a field that has lights, because that is a must-have. We've been looking for a field in central Massachusetts. We do finally have a field. We are in the process of just finalizing the lease agreement, and so we will be in central Massachusetts. The first game on July 11th will not happen at the College of the Holy Cross, and nor will it happen in the city of Worcester. We'll be outside of the city of Worcester, but we needed to take this step just to preserve baseball for the summer. And we've talked about some of the different things that we've had to go through here. Finding a ballpark is number one on the list.
Right.
Then making sure that these players are healthy enough to play. And so we've instituted things like temperature checks when these players come in. We do a simple 4-question survey every day to them to make sure that they're not exhibiting any of the symptoms of COVID-19. And then they're wearing masks in the dugout. We've got managers and pitching coaches that are walking out to the mound for mound visits wearing masks. And we've got a manager talking to umpires that are wearing masks. So it's a new world. And this is the only way that we're able to play baseball right now. But I'll take it, because we're actually playing baseball. And when that first pitch was thrown last night, I said, wow, this is actually happening.
Yeah, that sound of a fastball hitting a catcher's glove, the smell of freshly cut grass, the crack of the bat. Yeah, let's just say I may have at times sampled, if you will, a variety of hot dogs across New England, as well as their take on local beverages. We'll find out next week who that municipality is. They've got to be awfully proud, though. They've got to be thrilled with this opportunity.
Well, I think it's an opportunity to bring the Bravehearts brand of baseball to a different community. Mm-hmm. And it's an opportunity for us to showcase the hospitality, because, yes, I work in baseball, but I'm not a baseball guy. I'm not an expert on how to judge talent. That's what I hire people for. That's what the coaching staff is for. My background is in entertainment. My background is in fan assistance. So we make sure that when fans come to our games, there's an entertainment aspect to it as well. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is, if you were to survey our fans leaving the ballpark, 80% of them wouldn't be able to tell you what the final score was because they're there for something else.
Again, I've been to a number of Pittsfield and games, and what's interesting to me too is that the community spirit that's risen around the league. Now, Pittsfield was like many older ballparks, a storied park, and that's a nice way of saying there had been quite a few teams that had worked their way through that park over the years before the Futures League came along, and Futures League has introduced a great deal of stability into that facility, and that's critical because we don't want to lose these facilities. They've all got their own history, and that history can be very different for literally the in some cases hundreds of thousands or more fans that have visited these facilities throughout their entire life. It's a part of their hometown, and the excitement around a Pittsfield game, which is an older mill town, a nice mill town, buried, if you will, out in the Berkshires. I'm sure you've done your fair share of bus rides down Route 90, late at night coming back. It's a stretch. It's kind of on the outer edges, if you will, of your league. But you feel that community buzz around that. For those few hours, that's where the action is in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, isn't it?
Yeah, and some of that is because you've got these local families and friends who are going out to support the baseball player that they watched in high school, that they used to support at the high school games, or maybe they're watching him at his college. So now you've got a built-in crowd of family and friends who are there to support that player and potentially that player's high school teammates who are on a summer collegiate baseball team playing for the city of Pittsfield. That's where the crux of the fans are coming from. This is a very family-based organization where families are the ones that are coming to our games.
Excellent. Now let's talk about a little bit about the team itself. How do you? And I understand that you've got the quote unquote baseball side of your team. But generically speaking, is there an open call for tryouts every year? Is it all referral? Does each team do their own scouting? What's that process look like?
Well, typically the roster starts being built in late August, right after the season is over. And that would be for the following summer. A lot of that roster building happens through relationships. The coaches of our team have relationships with college coaches in New England and perhaps college coaches who are outside of New England, but may have started their careers by playing baseball up here in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. There is an open tryout that typically takes place in late May. And that at that point, many of these rosters in the league are already full. And so that tryout is usually to identify players who could easily slide into a role halfway through the season if one of the players on the roster gets injured. And that's really where our talent pool comes from, so that we can make quick decisions to sign additional players locally when somebody gets injured or gets shut down by his coach. Let's say that a pitcher pitches 30 innings for us over the course of the summer, and the college coach says we want to shut him down. We don't want to put too much stress on his arm. He will leave our team, go back home, and we'll bring in somebody else to finish the season. But a lot of that happens with relationships. There's a lot of college coaches out there that may have even played in this league or played in an independent professional league that was in New England and have great relationships with the people who are currently coaching our college teams.
You've got to, I'm looking at the roster right now. And by the way, again, this can be found at WorcesterBravehearts.com, WorcesterBraveHearts.com. The inspiration, I'm assuming, is a certain Mel Gibson movie. Is that where it comes from?
That's what everybody thinks. It's actually not. Brave. It was named by the community with over 2,000 different entries, and Bravehearts was the name that the community voted on. Brave in honor of the military, police, and particularly the firefighters in the city of Worcester. And Worcester has a history of heroic firefighters who have given their lives in the line of duty here. And it's unfortunately tragic, but we would want to do something to honor those firefighters. Heart is because Worcester is the heart of the Commonwealth. So you take the brave aspect of the firefighters and the heart aspect of the heart of the Commonwealth, and that's how you get Bravehearts.
Excellent. Do you want to talk about anybody on the roster? I'm looking down this list. You've got some great baseball schools here: UNS Amherst, Stonehill, Franklin Pierce, as you mentioned. You've got a bunch of players from BC. Very local on the scene is, of course, Assumption, which is part of that great university community that's centered around Worcester. But anyone in particular? I know you don't play favorites, but I'm always intrigued by switch hitters. You showing a couple of them, and by the way, if you go to the roster side, it's great because there's a real breakdown of what these guys do. But who would you want to talk about? Anyone that we should in particular be looking for this year?
Well, a lot of times the Futures League is recruiting not just the juniors and the sophomores that are becoming seniors and juniors. This is the one league in the Northeast that actually allows recently graduated high school seniors to play. And so when we've got a recently graduated high school senior that is coming to our team, typically we will take that player. We only take 4 of them, but we'll take that player if he's committed to a Division I program. And so this year we look at a player like John West, who's one of our pitchers. He's from Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. He is 6 feet 8 inches tall and throws the ball in the low 90s. He's a Boston College commit, so he'll be going to BC in the fall. And this is the type of player that a lot of scouts would come to look at. Not yet, because he's not yet eligible to be drafted. But you take a look at some of these kids that are playing for us. Coleman Picard, who is Auburn resident who hit 93 miles an hour on the gun the other day. You're taking a look at some of these Ivy League students, and we've had student athletes from Brown, we've had student athletes from Harvard, we have a student athlete from Dartmouth on the squad this year who's our catcher, Ben Rice, a left-handed hitter who will be a senior at Dartmouth in the fall and hit 7 home runs in a limited amount of time last year. These are the types of players that I think the scouts want to come and look at because, again, the New England ties and the fact that you're actually getting to see the best talent that New England has to offer, and this is what's being showcased in the Futures League.
Mm-hmm. You've got a pretty strong presence of pitchers here. Now, do you folks limit the pitch count? Is there, is that just because you want to give a lot of guys an opportunity to hit the mound? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are a lot of pitchers in this league. That is because we play a longer season. If you were to look at the New England Collegiate Baseball League and the Cape Cod League that I mentioned earlier, the New England Collegiate Baseball League plays 42 games. The Futures League plays 56.
Wow.
And that's significant. And in fact, there's a lot of college coaches that don't like the longer season because they don't want their players to burn out their arms over the course of the summer. Mm-hmm. But that is also why our rosters are bigger. We have 35 players on our roster, which means that there are about 20 pitchers. There are strict pitch count limits to make sure that we're not taxing the shoulders of these prospects. And we need to make sure that they're adhering to a certain number of days rest after each time that they pitch. The amount of Tommy John surgeries that I have seen in college baseball in the last 10 to 15 years is outrageous, and that number continues to grow. So we need to be cognizant of that. We need to make sure that we're not taxing the shoulders and the elbows of these talented young men.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I grew up. I have a feeling you and I are of a similar generation. You might be a little bit younger. Growing up, one of my idols was Tom Seaver, and here was a guy who, even if it was he had 2 outs in the 9th inning, or whatever, he had to be dragged out of the game not to complete a game. We've come a long way, haven't we? Particularly with regards to young arms.
Isn't that strange how the sport has changed? And you've got these specialist pitchers now that come in for one batter. And that's, of course, what has drawn out the length of the games. Mm-hmm. I don't know what has happened over the course of the years. People will talk to me about the fact that you're looking at a guy like Tom Seaver or Gaylord Perry, and these guys used to throw 250 innings, and they'd have 12, 13, 14 complete games over the course of the season, and we'd say, well, what's different? And they say, well, these guys all used to work on farms when they were a kid, and that's how they built their body strength up. They would work on the farm, and of course, who knows? There's a lot that has changed in baseball. There's a lot that has changed in the conditioning, in the nutrition aspect of the sport. It's troubling that we are dealing with so many Tommy John surgeries at this point. Many times we'll talk to Little League coaches and we'll say, well, why is this happening? And sometimes it's that in Little League, the kids are throwing far too many innings and they're starting to throw curveballs by the age of 9 and 10 before their arm is fully developed. And that's putting too much pressure on their arm. There's a lot of different theories about this, but I think that it all feeds into the fact that we have specialist pitchers now that are now drawing out the length of the games. And that brings up a whole different issue. And that is the fact that, your baseball is losing its younger audience because these games are lasting too long.
Yeah, absolutely. And it to me, I'm a baseball traditionalist. I don't even believe in the DH, just for the record. I grew up in an era when pitchers could hit, and the pitching changes that would occur and the tactics that would occur in the dugout because of where the lineup was in a particular in a particular score and in the impact of the game, how important that particular game was. That was an art form in and of itself. How you manage your pitcher hitters. So I just see, there's challenges afoot here. I mean, I believe that Little League seasons have become, testaments to themselves. The Little League World Series now has become a nationally televised contest, and there's a lot of emphasis on getting into that. We're getting the program. Rhode Island's had some outstanding successes, and at the same time are famous now because of a coach from just a few miles from here, from Cumberland, from giving possibly one of the great pep talks of the ages after their team lost in the finals. So I'd like to think that all the folks involved in baseball are stewards of these young people, young men and women, who in terms of their physicality. I think you and I know that. Not always. But again, your program is geared towards not just development, but not just the COVID safety, but the overall integrity of the game and the integrity of the player. And that's why I think that this is all brewing up to the question I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot on is, how do we get a team in Rhode Island? Minor league baseball.
Man, we got some great opportunity. I heard there's a stadium that's opening up in Pawtucket.
I've heard that. When you look at, again, without getting deep into the politics of it, Pawtucket is, as a city and as Rhode Island as a state, baseball-wise, is traumatized at this point. It's been a rough couple of years, and personally, I've been in the thick of it. But I see the potential for a program like yours in Pawtucket as just being perfect. I mean, literally perfect. It's got all it's an older stadium, but so is Wacona, and sure. it's an older stadium, but it's got a great field. It's got great facilities, lots of parking, and a tradition of live baseball that goes back decades. And some of the great players in baseball history have spent time there. So I'm just going to say there's a lot of us who would love to see an operation like yours for all the reasons that we've just discussed in the last half hour or so take root in a city like Pawtucket, because I think not only is it great baseball, not only does it foster relationships between young men from area colleges, not only is it affordable for the community, but I think it's also the right type of partnership between a community and an operation. You folks are running a business. You need to make a profit, but at the same time, I get the sense from the communities I've talked to that it's much more of a partnership, if you will, than one side. I'll just leave it at that. One side trying to dictate terms to the other. And I think communities in New England, we're all a little beat up right now for a lot of reasons, particularly over the last year. And I think more of that and less of the other stuff, I think, would be a welcome addition to the state of Rhode Island. We need a place to go, and you guys just seem like, and again, this isn't the first time I've spoken with someone from your league. For 3 or 4 years now, I've tried to get someone from your league every year. And Mr. Hall's joined us a number of times. And again, great integrity, great operations, successful business people, great track record, and you're integrated in the community. It screams like Rhode Island, and it screams Pawtucket, and it screams McCoy Stadium. So I'm just going to put that out there, and I'm going to raise hell wherever I can to try and get you guys in for next year, because there's a hole in our heart if you're a baseball fan, but at the same time, we're Rhode Islanders. We don't cotton to being taken advantage of. So I think there'd be an amazing community welcome for you folks. You're predicting that you'll be on the field at home July 11th. And again, I hope you'll share with us as soon as you're able to exactly where tickets will be available and where you're going to be playing, because I know I'm going to make a trek up there, because it's I can't at this point in time. I need to get out, and I need to. One of the most fun aspects of minor league baseball is just the access to the stadium and the players itself. And little kids look at these college players like they're heroes. When you see the look in their eyes when they meet these guys, it's tremendous. But older guys like me need to smell that grass and need to sit out there and feel the sun and have a beer and stretch it out and watch a game.
Absolutely.
It's just wonderful. You guys won a championship last year. Do you guys have figured out yet what the structure of the playoffs are going to be this year? It's
going to be quick. The season is it's a 39 game season, and you're saying, wait a minute, that means there's an odd number of home and away games if it's 39 games.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. But this is not the year to worry about home and away games. We're worried about playing baseball. So once that regular season is over, we actually play 20 away games and 19 home games. Once that regular season is over, there's a 3-game series between the top 2 seeds to determine the champion. And that would wrap up on August 22nd, because the students will be going back to school right after that.
If folks can't get to a game on a given night, you folks have just announced, just literally about a week, within the week, that there is actually going to be a streaming service through a company called Blue Frame Technology. Can you give us a little background on how that'll work?
Yeah, this is really the first year that the league has decided that they needed to invest in video streaming, because we know that there are a lot of fans out there that might want to watch a game, but they're not yet ready to leave their homes and come out to a ballpark. Even if we're at 25% capacity, which is what it was in New Britain last night, that's 1,500 people. Yes, they are socially distanced, but people that aren't yet ready to go out into an area with that many people can watch online. And so Blue Frame Technology allowed us to create the Futures League app. FCBLnetwork.com is the website. And if you have a Roku device or an Amazon Fire Stick, you can download that app and watch every single game in the league this year. And the annual price is $75. If you sign up by Sunday. So it comes out, even if you're just following one team and you're watching the 39 or 40 games that team is playing, it comes out to, $3 a game to watch that broadcast. So we are investing in it because we feel that in order to showcase these players, we need to put more resources into video so that these players can also create their highlight reels and show them to scouts. That's a big part of what college baseball is about right now. Right.
It's all about generating that footage. One last question, and then I'm going to give you a chance to engage in what we always refer to here on the Coalition as shameless self-promotion. How many smiles did you see last night up in the stands?
Every single person. I'll tell you, it's difficult because you're wearing a mask. So I guess the correct answer is 0. Because if you're behind a mask, it's tough to tell if you're smiling, right? Isn't that? I always ask that. This is my mask right here. I got my Bravehearts bandana. I take it with me. So basically, this is how we would walk into the stadium, walking the concourse. And then when you're at your seat, you can basically take this off, or at least hang it around your neck so that it's ready. And when you have to go to the concession stand and you're leaving your seat, this is the new normal, that you need to have this mask with you when you're walking around a ballpark. But I will say that there were people were on every single pitch last night because they were just happy to be watching live baseball. And think about this, we've been talking about the state of Massachusetts and the state of Rhode Island, but consider Connecticut. The New Britain Bees are the only game going on in the state of Connecticut anywhere.
Wow.
After the NECBL announced that they have shut down, and the Hartford Yard Goats are not having a season, Norwich not having a season. So the New Britain Bees are the only, I guess, organized baseball team that you can watch unless you're watching Senior Ruth or American Legion. But even American Legion has shut down, and a lot of these teams are now playing as a different league, not under the umbrella of American Legion. So that's where you're going to find your baseball, the Futures League.
Excellent. Again, how can folks find you on the web, and how can they buy tickets, and just and how, again, if you can reiterate how they can do the streaming thing?
Sure. WorcesterBravehearts.com. And this being a strange summer, we have a big announcement that when we do announce our field, which will be on Monday, we are also going to announce that all tickets this year are free of charge.
Wow.
Because we have Yep. So we've got corporate sponsors that have lined up to help us with this. And so you can come out to a game this summer. We'll be here in the office on Monday. We know that the phone's going to be ringing off the hook once we finally announce where we're going to be playing our games, but it's free of charge. And that's because we're playing at a place where, in order to adhere to social distancing, we're also asking that fans may have to bring their own seats. They might have to bring their camping chairs or their blankets, much like a Cape Cod League game, spread out. We're opening up areas in the outfield so that behind the outfield fence that fans can enjoy the game. This is what we like to refer to as pandemic baseball. That's what we're playing. We're doing it safely, cautious, but we're doing it.
Right. It's a happening. Well, again, Dave, congratulations. This it's got to be a great feeling. It's a culmination of 10 years of hard work, investments in these communities, and again, just a love of the game. So nothing but the best. And again, as after the season's over, I hope you'll join us again as do a little bit of a recap of how the season went. And let's start talking baseball in Rhode Island again. And I have a feeling once folks get a sense of what the product is like, particularly after this summer, they're going to be hungry. And you know what? We're not sure where yet, but I'm just going to say it's a Bravehearts game is a quick drive up Route 146, and it's an opportunity to grab back, take back that which is so near and dear to New Englanders, and that is your summer. So, Dave, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and, of course, the mothership at coalitionradionetwork.com. You can see our older shows in our pre-digital analog days from the radio before we were on the Facebook at coalitionradio.us. Again, a big congratulations to the Bravehearts and the entire community surrounding the Futures League. We will keep you periodically updated during this summer. And again, take a ride, claim back your summer, have some fun. It doesn't get any better than this. We'll talk soon. Have a great night.